And with us now is the biologist, Brian Ford. Mr. Ford, thank you for joining us. How exciting is this new discovery?
It's really very good, but I must admit I was quite surprised when I read about it to realise that nobody had done it before, because it's a very easy thing to do.
Why has no one done it before, in your opinion?
One of the reasons is because they have tried it and it hasn't worked, although your report didn't say so. Before Tetra came along, they actually produced 368 of these little sort of separated embryos, of which they got one eventual successful pregnancy. When an egg cell is fertilized, it is just a single round cell, and the first thing it does is to break up into lots of cells. It looks at that stage exactly like a transparent blackberry or a raspberry. Now, sometimes, because those cells aren't held together terribly tightly, they actually drift apart. And then in humans you would get twins, or sometimes even identical triplets. What you can do is to get one under the microscope, if fertilization has taken place in a petri dish, and tease them apart with a couple of little hairs. And then you can make as many as you want. And as I say, they did over 350 before they got one to one.
It is something that one assumes that the body does naturally anyway.
Yes.
Explain that to us. What is the difference between this and the creation of Dolly?
Well, with Dolly, we began with an actual ovum, a fertilized egg cell ready to start growing in the womb, took out the nucleus, and while the cell is thinking, where's my nucleus gone, put back in a nucleus from a cell from Dolly. So that the cell then grew into an embryo that was identical with Dolly. What they've now done is to allow fertilization to take place with normal eggs and normal sperm, then to separate this little blastula of cells into several embryos. And each of those can then grow on. So in Dolly's case, the clones that you end up with are genetically identical to Dolly. In this new case, they're all identical to each other, but they're not exactly the same as either of the parents, any more than any of us are identical to either of our mothers or fathers.
So are there benefits to both techniques?
Yes, there are. This technique has the greatest benefit because almost anybody could do it in any lab, and quite why it so often goes wrong, I'm really not sure. But it is useful to be able to have colonies of genetically identical monkeys. They'd all have their own personalities. I mean, they're not going to act in exactly the same way.
Like twins don't?
Exactly like twins. But then you see, if, for example, you're looking to test a new diet, if half of identical monkeys have one diet and the other half have something else, and there are differences, then you know that the differences are due to the diet and not caused by the fact that they're genetically different.
But when you talk about the whole little row of cloned monkeys, you can hear people say, yeah, but what about cloning babies, and a whole little row of cloned babies, and that opens up a whole new debate.
It does, but we have been cloning, you see, for hundreds of years. Everybody likes...
Naturally.
Yes, Cox's apples. Well, the Cox apple, the original tree, was a purely chance mutation that just grew in somebody's garden. And they've since budded from it, and every single Cox's apple in the world is genetically identical to every other one. They're all clones. We've been cloning plants and vegetables and cattle and mice for many, many years. I actually think that some of the things we already accept, like donated sperm and donated eggs, some of those could pose far greater problems than what we're now facing. Although certainly I would be entirely against anybody trying to make an ethical support for doing this in humans.
But mums-to-be, some mums-to-be clone naturally anyway, don't they?
Yes, they do.
About twins.
Yes, it is believed that a lot of pregnancies begin as cloned twins and triplets. This little blastula of cells, as I mentioned at the beginning, is so loosely held together that they often drop apart. And it has sometimes been thought that most pregnancies, perhaps you and I, began as twins. It's just that the other one was lost, and you and I were the only ones that survived.
Mark finds it difficult coping with one of me, let alone two, let me tell you. Finally, where do you think this latest technology will take us now?
I hope it won't take us into any kind of science fiction realm. I hope people don't get it out of perspective. It's actually very exciting, and handled properly and ethically, it could teach us a lot about ourselves and a lot about the way to cure some of the terrible diseases like MS and cancer that still dog our heels even in the 21st century.
Brian Ford, thank you for joining us.
I'm not saying anything.
Good.
An independent inquiry.